All right, the second phase of this, is somebody timing me? They're going to tell me when to stop? Okay, actually, I'm very good about stopping when I'm supposed to stop, but I don't tell time that well, so if you tell me, and obviously I'm not reading the script, so if you'll tell me, I will comply. All right, Southern language history, and I'll obviously have to, wow. Native American languages were excluded by previous LAVIS, and I want to thank the conveners for being so sensitive to sort of our conceptions, our biases, and our exclusions of the significant Native American populations. And all of that they have to contribute. In many ways, more elusive than perhaps some of the situations on the West Coast because of the earlier arrival of Europeans, but in a sense also more expedient to describe, understand, and at the same time intriguing. Whether it's sort of how Native Americans such as the Lumbee have reconfigured themselves, having lost and not even being sure what their Native American language is, or Cherokee groups that are trying to revitalize their language as a token of their identity. But that's not the only side of the multilingual South. There's Spanish, French, and all of those varieties. And to think, for example, to say nothing of Seal and Bob's sort of discussions of Louisiana Sign Language. All right, and all of this stuff in terms of emerging and existent Latino communities in the South. Earlier Southern English. The curiosity about earlier Southern English is that if you look at the literature, there sure has been a lot more speculation about African American English than there has other Englishes in recent decades. Thanks to Michael Montgomery and his introductory plenary, I hope that in some ways we will balance that out, because it may not be as polemical, but it certainly is as controversial. Sort of like, when did Southern dialect really form? Was it, as Guy Bailey has maintained, or was it, before the Civil War? Or was it somewhere in between? But these are important questions that have been considered and need to be considered, to say nothing of the earlier contact situations and languages that have been talked about in terms of immigrant groups and triangulation in terms of African diaspora and so forth. And of course, we always talk about earlier African American English. And one of the things I'm going to take up in a little further depth, we'll address that in a minute. Okay, so contemporary descriptive issues. The diversity of Southern English, again, variation in the multilingual South, and specific structure. Actually, one of the curiosities, if you go back a couple of, to the first and second LAVIS, and you look at the papers, how many papers there are on Southern vowels, and how many papers there were at this conference. Actually, I'm tempted to quit based on my Philadelphia dialect, a uniquely Philadelphia rhyme, which would go something like, wow, the vow. Because vow and vowel are homophonous in Philadelphia speech. But certainly, the things that we are learning about and know about Southern vowels have moved us immeasurably forward in terms of specific structures. Another important thing is all of the papers on groups, individuals, and identities. Whether it's Jewish Southern English, whether it's styling in terms of crossing and so forth. This also is something that I suspect a couple of LAVISes ago was relatively absent, and this is a wonderful theme. Now, what I'd like to do is just take one of the themes that was an important, and I hope that I'm being faithful to what it was, that was probably the most predominant theme of the original LAVIS, which was subtitled Perspectives in Black and White, all right? And that is, what do we know about African American English today that perhaps we were trying to get at when the first LAVIS was convened? And so what I'm going to do is quickly summarize, and a lot of this stuff is published elsewhere. As a matter of fact, it's published several times elsewhere. As I often say to my students, every good idea is worth 6 papers. Okay, but before I do that, I would like to pay tribute to the person who, in a sense, inspired our developing interest in isolated African American communities in the South, and that is Muse O'Brien. Some of you may know the paper that Kirk and Jennifer Tamburo and I wrote called Isolation Within Isolation. It was a story of Muse O'Brien, which is a remarkable story. And it's sort of like linguists only come upon these stories once in their lifetime, of a single African American family on the island of Ocracoke who lived there since the 1860s. And when we got there, we didn't know there were any African Americans. And we found out that there was one woman who was living on the island, at that time 94 years old, I believe, Muse O'Brien. No, actually she wasn't 94 at the time. Okay. Well, I do know how old she is now. She's 100 years old, because a couple weeks ago we went to Ocracoke to celebrate her 100th birthday. And I would like to pay tribute to Muse O'Brien. On her 100th birthday, we prepared a little 5-minute segment on Muse O'Brien. We won't speak, we have her on tape. Kirk and I did the first interview, and then Natalie and some of the women in our team did better interviews with her and her sisters and so forth. And so what I'd like to do is simply pay tribute to Muse O'Brien, and hopefully you'll get an idea. You know, one of the things I talked about yesterday that is an important approach to communities is that, and it's really great for linguists to say this, subjects are not objects.